Namaste, Jai Hind, and welcome to this very special edition just on the eve of Budget Day. I'm Anand Narasimhan coming to you live from the CNN News 18 and Federal Bank Prime Time studios. We should have a slew of experts who watch the financial markets, who also look at Bharat's health as an entity, as an economy, and perhaps somewhere its competitiveness on the global stage as we are trying to drive towards that vision of a Viksit Bharat. Politics aside, ladies and gentlemen, we need to become a Viksit Bharat within 100 years of our independence if we've got to go anywhere as a nation going forward. And we are on that track. And if you look at the global cues everywhere where continents, nations are struggling, we are still rising, we are still growing. And there is a demand, there is an active workforce, there's a captive catchment of talent which the world can dip into. We are 1.4 billion, of which nearly about 60 crore is industrious and can contribute to the world. Now, how is it that we make ourselves useful, we make ourselves attractive? These are all questions. And of course, the middle class is going to turn around and say that, all right, the salaried professionals are burdened with the direct taxes. What's in it for us? Some of these questions, will they be answered by the Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman? We'll ask a slew of intelligent minds who are just taking their seats even as we are speaking. We got Piyush Doshi with us of the Foundation of Economic Development with us. We've got Nalin Mehta, who is the Managing Editor, Money Control. And even as I introduce Nalin, I have Rajiv Mantri, author and economist, who's sitting and taking his seat. Namaste to all of you. And we should have Rajiv Desai joining us and Gurcharan Das ji also joining us any moment now, filling those two chairs in front of us. But let me start with you, Piyush ji, and to Nalin and to Rajiv as you concise your thoughts. What are your three big expectations? Let's start from there. What are your three big expectations from the Finance Minister as she presents the budget?
Okay, that's an easy one for me. The big expectation is that, one, what they should continue doing, which is investment in infrastructure, which was significantly ramped up during the last 10 years. I would like to see further increase in them, at least continuity on that front, because that has been a key driver of our economic growth. Second, would like to see some very specific measures to drive investment, because investment will translate into growth. So what is it that government doing to incentivize investment?
Into what? Into a specific...
Into manufacturing.
Into manufacturing.
So specifically manufacturing. That's the sector which can create large-scale employment. That's where our people who are partially unemployed or underemployed in agriculture can move to manufacturing jobs. And that's where we would like to see incentives for investment. PLI schemes, for example, PLI 2.0, extending it to some sectors, revamping it. And third, factor market reforms. Basically, they go to the core of our competitiveness. The reason investment is not happening is because in various industries, we are not competitive. And what is government doing to improve our factor market situation? So, for example, would be lovely to see some signal towards finally implementing the new labor codes for labor market reforms, or something around capital markets, reducing cost of capital, power, and then finally rationalizing customs duty on some of those inputs, which basically hurt our exports. So these are the three main areas I would like to see being addressed more.
Three, and then the subparts for clause 3. That's what Piyush has outlined. Nalin, for you?
So I think a great deal will depend on the government's reading of the election result. On is it more of the same, or do you need a radical reset? At Money Control, for example, we're calling it the reset budget. A great deal depends on that. 2 or 3 things to watch out for. How much is the government looking at additionally? See, there are about 2.3 lakh crores, which are roughly additional compared to the interim budget in terms of tax collections and RBI dividends. So that's the extra room government has to play with. Now the question is, where do you put that money or parts of that money? 3 things that I would be looking for. One is on rural, on spending for rural consumers. We, for example, carried some a report on increases in say PM Kisan from 6,000 a year to 12,000 perhaps. Also the idea of more for women. Now whether that happens or not, we will see. But how do you put more in the hands of the rural consumer, which is also one of the messages from the election. The second, I think, is what is going to happen on the demand for special category status to the states which are now critical as allies to the BJP in this government. How do you address some of those concerns? Andhra Pradesh in particular, Bihar, Odisha as well. And finally on infrastructure. Infrastructure is something which has been a leitmotif of this government's strategy so far. How much does that continue? So those are the three things that I would be looking for.
Right. As far as the special category status, earlier in the Lok Sabha, the government came out and said that given the current rules and the current system, the way it is, abhi tak ke pravdhan mein aisa koi hamare paas hai nahi that we can actually accord the special category status.
That's true, but the question is that what does the government do to address the political issue
so
around
without
that
calling it
outside of
special
that, right?
category,
So
how do I drive special? How do I give
special?
special attention to Bihar, Odisha, and Andhra Pradesh? Rajiv, yes. Namaste, Gurucharan Das ji. So good to see you, and Namaste, Rajiv ji. Lovely to see the grand old minds also joining with some young ones, you know. So, but
Both grand and older.
I think grander rather than older.
let us say the August minds who have just joined us, and since you walked in last, so that's why it is first in and first out in terms of their thoughts. And the question that I put out is your top 3 expectations from this budget to start with. What are you expecting the finance minister to do? So Piyush ji was very clear. He said investment in infra, so that's common with Nalin. Nalin focused on the rural economy. He focused largely on manufacturing. He said, how are we going to be more competitive? And so he said labor codes and some of these things which are pending, some of the thumbs up from Gurcharan Das already has come there. Rajiv, where do you stand? So I'm coming to Rajiv now, then I'll come to Gurcharan ji, and then that's also Rajiv Mantri, and that's Rajiv Desai.
Hello.
So the junior Rajiv first, or the younger Rajiv first. Anji.
So I would watch for what the government decides to do with privatization. We've had the privatization policy in place now for the last 4 years now, I think, and only seen one major divestment of that scale.
Okay.
Or maybe you can say 2 if you count Neelachal Ispat and Air India both. So I think that is going to be a very important indicator to me. I hope the government stays the course and continues on that path.
Despite the criticism, despite the politics, etc.
But that is something I believe that has to be managed. I mean, if we are going to progress on that path of 8 trillion GDP and 12 trillion GDP, I don't see a way around it. We have to get the government out of certain industries, reduce the footprint of government in many industries, and we already have a privatization policy in place, so we should see movement
be a
forward
little
on that
more
front.
aggressive on that path.
Absolutely, we want. I would like to see a commitment to that, in spite of the political changes and so on that Nalin mentioned.
Right.
Second, I would say I would echo Piyush ji's point that factor market reforms matter. I don't think, again, like if we have to get to that higher trajectory of growth and output, we can't get on with it by having more and more schemes, which are essentially kind of bridging the gap in some of the factor market deficiencies. We need to see fundamental changes. Maybe the budget is not the right forum to announce that.
But it has to show the direction that there is an intent to do.
Yes, it should show the intent to do so. And finally, I think financial sector reforms need to continue, especially on the credit side.
Especially on the credit side,
because when we speak of MSMEs growing, when we speak of, I think the economic survey references the German Mittelstand system of large, vibrant MSME ecosystem.
Correct.
So we can't have that unless you have credit reforms in the country. Even today, unfortunately, it's very hard to access credit for manufacturing enterprises. So if we want those 500 crore manufacturers to become 5,000 crore manufacturers, something has to give, and I think credit has to be eased.
So you've got to figure out how do you do that without putting the banks which are finally in good financial health back into a system.
Obviously, I'm not suggesting go create NPs or something, right? Not that way. But I think I do believe we are too conservative.
We're too conservative.
Our credit system is too conservative, or rather has gotten too conservative because of prior errors and past kind of crises that the country has seen. But somewhere one cannot, there's a saying, right, that every general is fighting the most recent battle.
Correct.
The last war. Yes.
Correct.
Every general is fighting the last war. So we need to stop fighting the last war and start making progress on making credit available in a rational manner to the MSMEs.
So we've got to figure that out, because otherwise we can't afford to be as a nation risk averse if you really want to take that giant leap.
And tied to that is job creation as well, of course.
Correct. Gurcharan ji.
So I'm going to come at this same. I think I'm substantially in agreement with what has been said. But think of the virtue of these budget discussions is that for once in a year at least, they make us look at the next 5 years. So I think of the budget really as a 5-year plan and how we're going to move there. And fortunately, it's a new administration, Modi 3.0, but I don't think much is going to change from the path, because the path they've had has been a responsible path of high capex, infrastructure spending, fiscal deficit control. All these things I think will continue. But, if you look at it in a little longer point of view, since 1991, our nation has grown, our economy has grown at almost 6%. Now for a democracy, this is amazing. We have lifted 450 million people out of poverty. The middle class has grown from 10 to 30%. But we have failed with one singular way, and that's jobs. And why? Why? Because only 2 out of 3 cylinders of the economy have fired, and one of them has really failed.
Manufacturing.
And that is manufacturing. I mean, this is an amazing thing. That's why you can't blame this government. The problem started from 91 that we have not yet come to grips with. And we have to come to grips with it. So, and every country that succeeded along this path, and the latest was China, they did it through the export of labor-intensive manufacturers. We think we have a big market. It's not. China was a market 4 times bigger, and they realized that even they could not succeed depending on their market. So we have to export. And the biggest index of our failure is that export of manufactured goods is only 2% of world manufacture.
Correct.
So whether we are growing at 7%, fastest growing economy, and all these things that we talked, high GDP growth, but we have not done the basics. And we can, I don't want to start telling you how to do that. I have a formula, and if you want at any time, I'd like to tell you.
We'll elaborate on that, because I think
I'd like to elaborate on that.
We will. Let me just get Rajiv ji's thought process on it.
Mine is a 1-point priority.
Manufacturing.
Jobs through the export of labor, and it can be done. Export of labor-intensive manufacturing.
It is possible, and somewhere I think a lot of us also believe that it cannot be a 5-year budget. It's got to be a 20-year plan.
Correct.
And irrespective of which political disposition comes in the next 5 years,
and
they've got to stay on the path that they will carry this forward. Because I think everybody realizes that unless we are a manufacturing hub, we are not going to be able to create jobs. We are not going to create the engine. Like the third cylinder has to fire more than the first 2 cylinders.
The difference between now and 1991 is that the preconditions for an industrial revolution are far better. Road mileage is doubled. Port handling capacity is quadrupled. We are one country with GST. So a lot of things are going. The digital revolution has taken away the friction.
So your thoughts, Rajiv ji?
I think the sector that can create employment is the real issue here.
Yeah.
And this government's failure has been its failure to create employment. And so whatever policies, whatever tax and spend policies they have to come up with has to be not only to create jobs, but to create jobs with decent incomes, not just any old jobs. I didn't say that. Digging holes and stuff like that. So I think that there is a need, and actually this kind of discussion has taken place in previous budgets as well.
Correct.
So this is not something new. What that tells me then, that despite all of the posturing, the macho posturing of this government, that we are here to get things done and so forth, fact is the bureaucracy still runs things. And on the contrary, it used to run things in the past, now it's running circles around everybody. So you're not going to get very far just by focusing on manufacturing and stuff like that. You have to create jobs. First, infrastructure sector is a good example, and jobs that pay a decent income, so people can buy stuff. So Right now you have high unemployment and you have high inflation. So where you're stuck, you're between the devil and the deep blue sea. And I don't see anybody as of now who has any clue about what to do on this score. So you get a lot of populism, cut taxes, etc., etc. I don't think those are political instincts. They are not.
But one of the biggest grouses with this government is that they are not giving too many tax stops. They have been very, very, very steadfast. The middle class is saying there's nothing. I am the one from a middle class perspective. We are the ones who are the only ones levied with direct taxes. The direct taxpayer is not getting too much on hand or tax savings. That's not happening. You've got a new tax regime that you put me where all my existing saving mechanisms are also going to go bust. You are saying that the government is actually doling out more taxes. Somewhere it looks like they're trying to encourage the rich to invest more and to pay, create more. They are encouraging, trying to help the poor, uplift them. So there is this gap, this 30% of the middle class is feeling that we've not got much.
When the investors see sort of turmoil within the domestic sphere, it's the last thing on their mind.
But are the rich seeing turmoil or are they seeing lack of competitiveness?
Not rich. The investors, the investment community.
See, even the rich today in our country, they want to grow richer. And in that process, they will employ more people and more people's lives will be uplifted.
That's been written in the old Indian text. Everybody wants to get richer.
Correct, but that's how it was. If you look at our old economies, where Bharat was a phenomenal thriving economy of the world, this landmass, despite various years, was because we had all three cylinders firing. We were also a manufacturing hub, we were a trading hub, we were a cultural hub, we were also employing into skills and arts and architecture, and we were creating stuff which was phenomenal. 2,500-year-old temples are engineering marvels. They're not just religious hubs or Buddhist viharas, everything. So we were doing something right, which we need to figure out again now. I'm just bringing it back, Gurcharanji, and then back in here.
Well, I think, frankly, I won't depend on Indian industrialists in this case. To succeed in labor-intensive manufactures, they've had 30 years to do it. More than 30 years. They've not done it. I mean, let's take garments. Look at our brands, Raymond's, Arvind and all that. Do they have even 1% of the world market? Or 0.1%?
Are they competitive enough to manufacture for the world market?
Yeah, so therefore,
textiles का सबसे बड़ा problem वही है.
So therefore,
Bangladesh, Vietnam, China are manufacturing same fabric, same at 20% cheaper cost.
What I would do is the PLI scheme. The PLI scheme should first of all go to the very big guys. I would not take a chance with anybody small. You're competing in the world market with entrenched competitors. Now, I come from a consumer product background, and one thing I know is that unless you can provide the consumer with a superior benefit, don't enter that market unless you can beat the leader. So I would bring the leader here. How many of our people, how many government officials have gone to the top consumer product companies, the labor intensive companies, to ask them, Nike, Uniqlo, I'm just taking this garment as one example. These are the leaders today in the market, Levi's, etc. Go to those brands. They all have contract manufacturers in different countries and offer them, we want you here, aim the PLI, before we come to the Indians, but I'll just say that reduce the tariffs, so we can join, because they are interested not in the Indian market. Indian market is very small. We want the global market.
So you're saying get the big guys and tell them, if you're going to produce and if you're going to export beyond a certain number, then I'll reduce the tariffs
reward. No, wait a minute. Only reward them for exports. Don't reward them for production.
For production, okay.
Only reward them for exports. Enter only labor-intensive sectors. Stop this noise from the state governments who all want to have a PLI scheme. All that is nonsense. go to the big guys. Now, the trouble, as Rajiv pointed out, the bureaucracy is not used to doing that. How did Apple come here? This is the approach I'm giving. Go to a company like Apple. How did it come here? You know, I don't want to even tell you what role the bureaucracy played in it. So we need people to target PLI to the very best. And then, of course, if an Indian company, your Adanis, Ambanis, Tatas, or whatever, who want to enter, but you know, they're not going to succeed right away. We want success.
So you're saying do it to a scale, do it to export, and that's how you're going to push labor-intensive manufacturing, because labor-intensive manufacturing, like Piyush was saying, and Rajiv wants to come in. So I'll come to all of you gentlemen. No, that's what's going to create jobs. So 15 lakh jobs, you know, what was the...
Yeah, I mean 10 billion of garment manufacturing would create 15 lakh direct jobs and more indirect jobs.
Right? So if you're doing 10 billion of garment exports, you're going to create 15 lakh jobs.
Most jobs any manufacturing can create. So I'm 100% with Gurcharanji.
Okay. Rajiv, yes?
No, I just wanted to say that I thought it was a little harsh on Indian corporates. I mean, at the end of the day, they're operating in a certain environment with certain constraints. If you tie someone's legs together, you can't expect them to run.
Correct.
Which is why I said we need those labor reforms, we need those factor market reforms.
I don't think the Indian corporates are that innocent and ineffective. In fact, they've shown that they can actually dictate stuff to the government. We've seen that. We've seen that in Gujarat. We've seen that in Maharashtra. I'm sure in Orissa. But so I don't think the corporates are.
Look, I wasn't blaming corporates, but I'm trying to. You're also right.
I believe with these policies, no business can operate.
No, I agree with you.
Foreign or Indian.
But this will see what Apple's coming has forced the government to improve the nation's competitiveness.
So may I give an example on that, Gurcharan? The Apple, I'll pick up the example you said. We are now about 14-15% of production of iPhones, up from 8% earlier. Now, last year, a few months ago, there was a move to expand into iPad production. What happened? It didn't work out. Where did that go? It went to Vietnam. Now that move is being revived again, because at that point, the tie-up was being done with a Chinese company. Now, the thing is, we as companies start looking at diversifying outside of China, we have to get on that boat, which goes back to what Mr. Das was saying earlier. And if we don't do that, and that's also a political imperative, it's not just an economic imperative in the esoteric sense, because jobs are critical for any government to remain in power.
Yeah, and let me give you some figures on footwear exports in particular.
So, yeah, go ahead, please.
So
please,
in FY, I'm reading this from the economic survey that just came out today. So FY21, the footwear exports from India were 1.8 billion, and now they are 2.5 billion. So in 3 years, there's been a major increase in footwear exports from India. So we are doing things correctly. I mean, not fast enough.
You know what I'm just saying is, don't make the mistake of saying that we are, when we say make in India, it shouldn't be make in India by Indians only.
Correct.
We
just
want to
come
go
and
for
make
the
in
best.
India for the world, and whoever is making, make it here.
Because make in India is what creates jobs.
Yeah.
So we don't care whether it's a Martian who comes to create jobs. It can be anyone.
Anyone.
But I'm just saying, when you're going to penetrate the global markets, you know, you're going to compete with very big giants. Bring them, at least let them outsource to us.
No, I'm just asking you this. In the last 10 years, are we in a much better place than we were in 2014 or say 2010? Financial health of the country. Do the banks have more money to lend? Do we have more coffers or more money in the coffers to perhaps give as guarantee? And today, overall quality or in terms of income and confidence in the country, is it at a better level, or are we still the same? From an investor point of view, what are 1 or 2, 3 things which are going to make me come and manufacture here? Second, is anybody addressing the skilling aspect? Tomorrow somebody comes out and says, I want to make here, I'll make a labor intensive, but give me labor. Today you have states who are saying, I will reserve 70%, 75% jobs, like Haryana, Karnataka, all of them coming out and saying for our own local people. But the local manufacturers are saying these people don't know how to work and they don't want to work. So where is my skill? Where is the skilling part? Perhaps you think this is the right time, Piyush.
So out of, to your first question, that are we better off in the last 10 years? Yes, we are on some dimensions. I will tell you which ones. One, our infrastructure has improved, so our logistics cost is much better. Our power cost is, both reliability of power and cost of power is now far more competitive. Our capital cost, so generally inflation is low, our banking sector is now in better health. So Indian corporates also, when they are borrowing, the premium they are having to pay is now much smaller compared to what they used to. So on 3 of the factors of production, we are much better off now. There are a couple of areas where either we have not made progress, or in one instant we have actually moved back on labor. This is, partly your skilling point. So on labor, we have so much labor, but we are artificially holding back our labor by imposing the most restrictive labor laws in the world. And I'm really waiting for the new labor codes to come in, which will address it partly. So we are making our labor far more expensive than it needs to be. To your point on garment exports, compared to Bangladesh, our labor is 50% more expensive. While if you actually set up a factory in Bihar, and if you allowed market rate, actually it will be more competitive than Bangladesh. But artificially we are keeping it high because of overtime restrictions, etc. Right? So we need to talk to the labor unions that labor laws are only protecting labor from jobs, from nothing else. They are only protecting them from getting jobs. So labor is one area where we are not, and second is that our input cost on some of the key products which go into input for exports, we needed to get back on the glide path to customs duty reduction. Our MFN rates have actually gone up a little bit in last 10 years. We are, where Vietnam is now operating at 3 to 5% MFN rates, we are at 12, 15%.
Yeah.
And with that, our raw material, if you are trying to make a component, an auto component, your steel is too expensive. If you're trying to make fabrics, your fiber is too expensive, right? So we need to have a competitiveness across our value chain. So in these 2 areas, we have fundamental disadvantage. Government is trying to address it partly through PLI.
But how do I balance this aspect of what Rajiv Desai said, that we need to create avenues where jobs will pay more, so the labor gets to earn more, and the gap that we need the labor to work more because we need to produce more. So there has to be a gap because we don't want sweatshops.
You can't force the companies to pay more. The way they will earn more is when there is more competition for jobs. When there is more competition for jobs, they will be able to demand more, right? In China today, the labor is earning 4 times more than India, not because Chinese government said that minimum wage has to be 4x. It's because when they created so many jobs, I can't hire a labor at the rate which they used to.
So I'll pay you more.
I will pay
by
you more.
Default,
The market has to be willing to pay more.
Come back.
There is still too much of the economy in the hands of the government. The so-called PSUs. There's still too much of it in the hands. And privatization is one aspect, you do that. But at some point you can determine that this is not a viable thing and close it down or sell it or do whatever it is. But you cannot just continue to throw good money after bad. And that's what...
And crowd out the private sector.
And that is exactly what everybody expected that this government will do. But they haven't done it.
The key issue on labor is really that we have 2 labor markets. We have the labor aristocracy, which works in the formal sector, which is 10 to 20% of the country's labor. Everything has helped them for the last 50 years. And it has actually hurt. It has hurt the rest of the... So for the sake of the 10%, you have destroyed the future of the 90% of the people. Now, what could be more anti-people than that? I sound almost Marxist, but I am actually the opposite.
No, actually, this is right.
One irony is that those who say there are no jobs are also the same people who say that we want these labor laws.
We want these labor laws. Okay.
Anand, to answer the previous question you would ask, are we better off from 10 years ago or not? So I want to answer that in 2 parts. See, today, for example, we spoke to one of the top deal makers in the country, and he gave us an interview saying that, look, over the next 7 years, about 150 billion is expected to be put in IPOs, in block deals, in secondary offerings and so on in the Indian market. It remains the second most exciting market after the United States. That was Vishal Kampani speaking to us earlier in the day. The point I'm trying to make is that while your fundamentals may be much stronger, and for example, if you look at government collections, I was saying earlier in the program about 2.3 lakh crores over and above the projections in the interim budget in tax collections as well as the RBI dividend. While all that is fine, and while you are saying 6.5 to 7% growth, which by the way is lower than the 8% which was once taken as a birthright in previous years, the real issue is labor-linked manufacturing growth. You know, you can have growth, but that if it doesn't trickle down, if you don't have real jobs for not just the labor aristocracy, as Mr. Das was saying, then you have a real problem in the political economy, and that's the key.
Okay, let me ask. We've got last 4-5 minutes before we have to terminate this conversation, and we'll take it forward into budget day very soon here. But if I were to say, let's say this 7%, 7.5% is a given. What needs to be done is another 4.5% of growth that comes from labor-linked manufacturing or labor-intensive competitiveness created in the thing. Because somebody was telling me that for us to get to a Viksit Bharat and to a really developed economy by 2047 as a vision, we need to not grow at 7 or 8%. We need to grow at 11.5 to 13%. That's the growth we need to achieve. And if you have to do that, then we've got to have this third cylinder firing. Rajiv Mantri and then the two gents and then final round of comments. Yeah.
No, so I would say now if you want to achieve that level of growth, the first question is how do you fund that growth, right? Which brings me back to financial sector reforms. Now, if you don't fix your financial intermediation or rather cling on to this, what I would call a very, very hyper-conservative approach. Even the economic survey had certain comments to make about the rise of equity markets and the alleged speculation that's going on in the stock market and so on. But we need to understand that you cannot finance growth unless you have access to credit in the country, unless you have thriving public and private capital markets. You simply can't fund that growth. So to speak of double-digit growth and to sort of project that out over 20 or 25 years, I think a lot of work has to be done on the regulatory side and on the enablement side. Do you think this budget is going to help convert savings into investment?
Do you think this budget is going to show anything in that direction, Gurcharan?
Well, I can't say. I can't say about financial sector reform.
No, net, let's just bring it all together under one ambit. That this budget of Bharat or for Bharat has to make Bharat more competitive.
Right.
So if I have to spell the word competitiveness, and that's the core of this budget, do you see it being addressed?
Well, I think there are indications, because you know the previous budgets have been, in a sense, preparing the grounds for this kind of takeoff that could take place. In other words, the infrastructure, capex spending, the responsibility on fiscal deficit, etc. All these have put us on a fast track of growth. Now, fast track of growth is a very nice place to be. This is the time now to say that let us target very specifically the labor-intensive sectors, and there are a vast number, food processing, lot of things are there, and you know, maybe give a signal to the states to go and send specific people to specific companies, whether Indian or foreign. But this is not how unfortunately, our civil service is not used to behaving in this rational manner. And so they are so process bound, procedure bound. Anyway, the point what we need to do is break out of that mold. And we are today in the best. By the way, let me just say, you're talking about double digit. Even if we achieve 8% growth, it would be great. We would get close. We would be, you know, Viksit Bharat is a goal. And if you can approach your per capita income today is 3,000.
Sir,
if it could go up above 10,000,
my worry is, हमारा केस ऐसे होता है कि 8% बोलते हैं तो 4.5-5 पे रुकते हैं, 13% बोलेंगे तो 8-9 पे आके रुकेंगे. So that's why I'm asking. But do you believe this aspect of competitiveness? How do I make Bharat and Bharatiya more competitive?
No, yes, of course, there is every need to do that, and I'm sure that they can find ways to improve competitiveness. But if you do a content analysis of major publications, just let's say major newspapers the world over, what they've written on India, say in the past 2 or 3 years, you will hardly find anything on economics. You will find things about CAA, NRC, you'll find all that kind of stuff, and the elections and all of that. You will not find anything on business opportunities, and so forth.
Because the publications are not getting the 5 gentlemen sitting here with us on the show to write to them. It also depends on who's writing and who's the publications are reaching out to write for
Well, they have
them.
their own biases. We can't do anything about that. I mean,
The solution
let them
is
enjoy
staring in our
themselves.
face. India is world class in services exports. We are the world leader in IT services, BPOs, so on. Why? What is the difference? Indian entrepreneurs are thriving, multinationals are coming here every day. Why not in manufacturing? Answer is very simple. There are just too many shackles to manufacturing anything in India. Just remove those shackles around all factors of production, and we will be our
No, and
economy
let me
is
put it this
ready
way,
to fly.
if we are looking at a 10 trillion GDP economy, your current share of manufacturing is about 16%. If you want to raise that to, let's say, 28% or 30%, and we're talking of a 80% increase and a larger economy, so you want to grow manufacturing probably 5 to 7 times from where it is today. So what do we need to do to achieve that?
So just let's just get more competitive, and for that you need to unshackle the manufacturing sector. That's what's going to create more jobs. That's what's going to create perhaps that third cylinder start firing, get it firing. Gentlemen, I have to wind up for the moment. No, but I have run out of time, but we'll park your point, sir. 8 a.m. on budget day, we're going live, and we'll get all of your thoughts and then perhaps take this conversation forward. This budget for Bharat, is it going to make us more competitive? Perhaps that's the underlying theme, and we're going to build up on that, continue to do that. Taking a very, very short break. When we come back, well, we shift focus away from the economics to the politics, ladies and gentlemen. Stay with us.
Well, Akanksha continues to stay with us on the broadcast. Akanksha, how does Kamala Harris plan to leverage this support, especially favoring the Democrats at this point of time, after when... Yeah, go ahead.
You know, you've already talked about how she's in fact honored. The fact is that we've seen that tweet come out from Joe Biden yesterday, where he has in fact extended all his support behind the vice president at the moment. And having said that, the only possible, there are multiple scenarios as we were telling you, that they may conduct various forums, sanctioned forums across the country, where you may have somebody also moderating those events. But the fact is that, you have had delegates who have been pledging their support behind Joe Biden. So in most likely the scenario, considering we've seen the US president sort of extend his support, sort of also cushion Kamala Harris's current standing, you may have that set of delegates who have in fact been supporting Joe Biden also extend their support behind Kamala Harris. Or you may, in fact, also have the Democrat National Convention, the DNC will be taking place in mid of August. You may have a voting that may take place over there. And it's very crucial right now for Joe Biden to also endorse a candidate, because that will sort of perhaps give more clarity to the rest of the party who to, in fact, rally for. But having said that, many would in fact within the Democrats be talking about how they would not want somebody anointed just yet. They would want a more democratic process to perhaps shape up. But will that mean that Kamala Harris is finally the only candidate is something we'll have to see take place in the next few days. We'll have greater clarity.
Right, Akanksha, I'll request you to stay with us on the broadcast as we are getting yet another breaking input from the United States itself. Now, soon after Joe Biden dropped out of the race and endorsed Kamala Harris as the Democratic nominee, Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump has hit out at her and said Kamala Harris owns the entire left-wing policy record of Joe Biden. The only difference is that she is even more liberal and less competent than Joe, which is really saying something. Now, Kamala Harris will be easier to defeat than Biden, and Trump is not wasting any time to attack or take an aim at Biden's endorsed successor. So these are the latest inputs that we are tracking at this point of time, where Trump has taken a dig at Kamala Harris. Well, Akanksha continues to stay with us on the broadcast. Akanksha, Trump is not wasting any time at all to take a dig at Biden's endorsed successor. How do we see this in the run-up for the November elections now?
It's going to be a very risky terrain now because, as I said, that this race certainly got more interesting after Joe Biden, who was being questioned for his mental acuity, decided to step down. So far, that assassination bid against Donald Trump, at the same time, that speech, which was almost seen as his resurrection point at the recently concluded RNC, had almost created a messiah figure out of Donald Trump, especially for the Republican voter base. Remember, because of Joe Biden's own ability and that disastrous performance at the last debate that we've all witnessed, there were a lot of questions about Joe Biden's own capability, turning their own Democrat supporter base as
Back on, ladies and gentlemen, with the conversation around the fact that since 1966, the Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh has been facing a certain level of notification. It's part of those list of organizations with whom civil servants or government employees were banned from associating with directly in all its activities and engagements. That notification today, that's put out by the government of India, takes RSS out of that list. And now civil servants or government employees can directly engage in the RSS and its activities. Clearly the opposition taking umbrage to this. But why the furor and what's the reason behind this? Let's try and understand that. Rakesh Sinha, Adil Hassan with us. Namaste and Jai Hind to the gentlemen. Thank you very, very much. Rakesh Sinha ji, the RSS has welcomed this move. But why has it happened 11 years after the Modi Sarkar?
The government was formed in 2014, and the priority of the government is not whether the government employees should come in the RSS Shakha or not, because the government meant by the RSS Swayamsevaks, they are dedicated to the development of the nation. The 1800 colonial laws have been removed. These laws were framed in 18th century, 19th century by the British regime. These laws continued in the Nehruvian and the Nehruvian era. This Modi era is free from the colonial laws. Now this very law rule was challenged in the court, and it is in due process the government has removed the ban on the government employees participating in the RSS activities. But the core question is that whether RSS is political or not political. This is the core question, and I am responding that question is that it is a secular fundamentalism which imposed the narrative, anti-RSS narrative in the discourse of the Indian nation. And that discourse has been perpetuated by the Nehruvian and Marxist, and it has been framed that RSS is political organization. My basic question is that the organization which has been working in 1,70,000 projects among the poor and downtrodden people in tribal area, Dalit area, marginalized people, urban poor, rural poor, tribal poor. Secondly, this organization, RSS has more than 36 affiliates, and these affiliates have one ideological leaning. That ideological leaning is the nation first. The culture the RSS opponents understand is a jhal manjira bajane wala sangathan. RSS takes a culture in a broader perspective. Its horizon of the culture is larger than they understand. This is creating consciousness among the people. Right. That consciousness is a consciousness of nationalism, consciousness of humanity, and consciousness of diversities. Okay. These consciousness is being contested by the Nehruvian and Marxist people. That's why they consider RSS as a political organization. Last one line. Because RSS, just one sentence. Because RSS participated in anti-emergency movement for sake of democracy. RSS participate for the banning the cow slaughter. Against the cow slaughter movement. RSS participated for the reconstruction of a Ram temple. All these things are related to democracy and liberalism and culture of the country. It cannot be bracketed as a political.
It was a 1964 clause that was invoked which considered the RSS as a political organization, and that's why the 1966 ban on RSS was included in that list. Adil Hassan, where do you stand?
Our stand is clear. We object the decision of the present government. I want to know what Mr. Nitish, Mr. Naidu, Mr. Jayant stand is on this. And my senior panelist, Rakesh Sinha, is telling RSS works in Dalits, tribal. Then why not a Sangh Pramukh from Dalit community, from tribal community, from backward community, from OBC community? Never no women representation. I know when the Manmohan Singh government was there, RSS was opposing FDI. Now in the Modi government, 100% FDI is allowed in national, in international, in defense also. Never RSS object on this. RSS never talks about employment. RSS talks about why Ajit Pawar is inducted in Mahayuti, but RSS don't have guts to make him out. RSS don't have guts to talk on corruption because they are all getting benefited by the government. Sangh Pramukh is benefited by Jet plus Suraksha. All the RSS top bearers are getting the best security from the government. They are enjoying the facility now because BJP know that RSS is not happy with that. तो मालिक को खुश करने के लिए कुछ किया जा रहा है. आरएसएस ने संविधान को नहीं माना, तिरंगा को नहीं माना, 52 साल अब तिरंगा को नहीं फहराया. इनका कोई हिसाब किताब नहीं है, FCRA नहीं है, कोई फाइनेंस मिनिस्ट्री में इनका लेखा जोखा नहीं है, ना होम मिनिस्ट्री में लेखा जोखा है. अपने आप को कल्चरल ऑर्गेनाइजेशन कहते हैं तो भाई हिसाब किताब देने में आपको क्यों दिक्कत होती है? आप मामला क्यों नहीं साफ रखते? आप बताइए कि करोड़ों की संपत्ति आपने कहां से अर्जित की, आप इतनी जो शाखाएं बनाए, बिल्डिंग बनाए, कहां से लाए? बाकी देश में कोई भी अगर इंस्टीट्यूशन, कल्चरल ऑर्गेनाइजेशन, उसको देना पड़ता है हिसाब. आरएसएस से पूछ लीजिए कि कोई भी हिसाब होम मिनिस्ट्री के पास है. आरटीआई से हम जानना चाहते हैं कि बतलाए आरएसएस कितना करोड़ रुपया किससे चंदा लिया, क्या फॉरेन फंडिंग क्या है, नेशनल फंडिंग क्या है, डोमेस्टिक फंडिंग क्या है, आरएसएस चलती कैसे है, करोड़ों अरबों का ट्रांजैक्शन कैसे होता है, ये तो आप कुछ नहीं बनाते हैं. एफडीआई का मनमोहन सिंह में विरोध करते हैं, मोदी सरकार में आपकी चुप्पी साधती है. रोजगार पे नहीं बोलते हैं, चाइना पर आप कुछ नहीं बोले, मणिपुर पर मोहन भागवत साहब 1 साल पर बोले. उन्होंने ये चलिए अच्छी बात, उन्होंने मोहन भागवत जी ने एक बात कही कि लोग अपने आप को नेचुरली बॉन्ड समझता है, तो उस बात पे उन्होंने कहा कि कोई अपने आप को भगवान रूपी नहीं समझे. आरएसएस को सरदार पटेल ने बैन किया था, संविधान को नहीं मानने पे बैन किया था. आरएसएस ने लिख के दिया कि हम संविधान को मानेंगे, तिरंगा को मानेंगे, देश के कानून को मानेंगे, तब उसका बैन होता था. अटल बिहारी वाजपेयी जी ने क्यों नहीं हटाया? मोदी सरकार को 10 साल तक क्यों याद नहीं आया?
ये जो प्रश्न
आदिल जी, कुंभकर्ण की नींद है, कुंभकर्ण की नींद टूटी क्या? बोलिए कि अपने मालिक को खुश करना चाहते हैं.
आपके 4-5 प्रश्न हैं, इसका मैं थोड़ा सा उसको प्रेसी कर देता हूँ, और ताकि पहला आपका ये है कि पिछले 15 साल एनडीए की सरकार रही है अंडर वाजपेयी जी एंड ऑल्सो मोदी जी, तब क्यों नहीं हटवाया, अभी क्यों हटाया? सेकंड, दैट देयर इज अ डिफरेंस बिटवीन द आरएसएस एंड द बीजेपी, तो आरएसएस को मनाने के लिए ये कदम उठाया गया. दैट्स द सेकंड पार्ट. The third part is that RSS is a political organization because it talks on all issues politics, it meddles in all issues politics, it is also benefiting from the current government, and so how is it not a political organization? Third part. Fourth part, that Sardar Patel actually challenged the RSS and wanted it banned because it was not following the constitution. Did he do that, or did he want the RSS to have a constitution of its own? So that is something Mr. Rakesh Sinha has to clarify.
And finance.
हाँ, पैसा कहाँ से पैसा आ रहा है, इसका कोई ऑडिट नहीं है, FCRA से कोई क्वेश्चन नहीं है. So all of this has been, these are 5 points. Rakesh Sinha ji, please answer. एंड आपने तिरंगा नहीं फहराया सर, 50 साल आपने तिरंगा नहीं फहराया.
किसी ओबीसी दलित महिला,
ओबीसी दलित, सो दैट इज द
क्यों नहीं बनाया?
सेवेंथ
की बात करते हैं, क्यों नहीं आप
सेवेंथ. ओके, लेट हिम गो.
किसी दलित को, ट्राइबल को, महिला को.
चलो, पॉइंट नोटेड. 7 क्वेश्चंस. राकेश सिन्हा जी, गो अहेड.
There is a limit of ignorance, and I think this is a wishful and willful ignorance of the panelists, that he is questioning something which is untenable and undesirable. If he does not know RSS, when he comes to this debate, he must understand. If I will speak on Muslim League, if I will speak on Communist Party of India, I must have some basic knowledge of these parties. I cannot come
please explain, Mr. Sinha, please explain.
Okay, let him answer.
Just I am answering your question. That it's not a question of difference between the RSS and BJP. RSS does its own work, and RSS is so much busy with his work that he does not meddle into politics. This question was raised in Rajya Sabha in 1960s when Y.B. Chauhan was the Home Minister. The RSS passed a resolution on Kutch, that of Pakistan intervention. Then the Congress member and Communist Party member said that it is a political resolution. And Dattopant Thengri was a RSS member who was representing.
My point is simple.
No, he's trying to say how they have never been.
He raised a very fundamental question that talking about the national integration, talking about the economic well-being, is it political? Then do you expect a culture or nation to remain
Why not you are talking about China? Why RSS not talking about China?
Second, then I think this person must read something. You got a very good chance in a channel which millions of people see. Watch this channel, and you are coming China. RSS, go and see the RSS website.
Why not you are asking Modi government of China?
Not once.
Adil Hassan, don't heckle. Your question was कि RSS ने तिरंगा नहीं फहराया. RSS ने तिरंगा नहीं फहराया 50 साल. बोलिए.
RSS is the one organization which was the first one. Adil Hassan's problem is that he does not accept the reality of
Sir,
party.
please answer, sir.
RSS was the organization. RSS, I am asking you, the millions of people who demanded Pakistan, they stayed in India. Those who didn't demand Pakistan, they went Pakistan.
I am not the supporter of Pakistan. I never visited Pakistan.
I'm not questioning. I'm not questioning your integrity. I am questioning that RSS is talking about the nationalism, which is inclusive. If you belong to this nation, your religion should not. Your religion should not be precondition for nationalism.
Rakesh Sinha, this allegation that the RSS did not fly the tricolour for 52 years, is it true? Along with the fact that the left till date does not hold the tricolour in its own office, but that's all right. But the RSS did not fly the tricolour for 52 years. Is that true?
No, those who know RSS, they don't know that RSS always celebrates the National Integration Day, Akhandata Divas. On that day, the tricolour is worshipped. In 1930s, when Congress accepted in Lahore Congress the full independence of the country, RSS celebrated in Sakha and worshipped the Sakha. So that does not arise.
Okay, so you're saying the allegation of that the Tiranga was not flown in Nagpur at the headquarters is false. Second question.
It is unfounded.
It is unfounded. Okay.
RSS has respect for the tricolour. We accept as a national flag.
Okay. Second. Was the RSS banned because it refused to accept the Samvidhan, or it did not have a Samvidhan of its own? Because every organization is supposed to have its own constitution.
No, RSS.
Hindu Rashtra, this country was formed on Hindustan and Pakistan. That's different. Their definition of Hindu is like of Veer Savarkar. Adil Hassan. Their definition of Hindu was based on Veer Savarkar, despite him being of the Vishwa Hindu Parishad. His definition. No. The Samvidhan. One minute. तथ्य पर जाओगे सर आदिल हसन. संविधान of Baba Saheb Bhimrao Ramji Ambedkar did not have the name secular. उसमें तो सेक्युलर था ही नहीं. तो आप गलत बोल रहे हैं. बाबा साहब भीमराव रामजी अंबेडकर के संविधान में सेक्युलर शब्द था ही नहीं. तो आप झूठ मत बोलिए. आप गलत मत बोलिए. आप गलत नहीं. उनके संविधान देश के 1 मिनट आदिल हसन 1 मिनट आदिल हसन आपके सवाल मैं पूछूंगा, लेकिन आप गलत बयानी मत कीजिए. क्योंकि सेक्युलर शब्द 1976 में देश इमरजेंसी में था, तब इंक्लूड हुआ था. बाबा साहब भीमराव रामजी अंबेडकर के संविधान में सेक्युलर था ही नहीं. उन्होंने सेक्युलर लिखा ही नहीं था सर. उन्होंने सॉवरेन डेमोक्रेटिक रिपब्लिक ऑफ इंडिया लिखा था. सॉवरेन डेमोक्रेटिक रिपब्लिक ऑफ इंडिया. हमारे संविधान में कहीं भी हिंदू राष्ट्र लिखा नहीं है, लेकिन इस देश का विभाजन हिंदुस्तान और पाकिस्तान में हुआ था, और वो धर्म के नाम पे हुआ था. बट राकेश सिन्हा कमिंग बैक, आई एम रनिंग आउट ऑफ टाइम. राकेश सिन्हा नो, you are stating falsehoods. 1 minute, Rakesh Sinha. My simple question, sir, if this was so, if it was so factually wrong, why did it not, this ban, this notification was not lifted during the time of Mr. Vajpayee? And since 2014 to 2024, why was this not done? The fact that the government was busy doing other things and they found time to do it now is somehow not palatable, sir.
No, this is You know, this is not so
What
much
about
important
finance?
question that RSS has emphasized or the government has emphasized. This is a normal course. We found that this is outdated and this is undemocratic.
Okay.
But one last thing that Hindu represents diversities.
Right.
And
Sir, I have to-
Semitic religions like Islam and Christianity.
why not
No, that's a different
They-
discussion for
they
another day.
authoritarian
Different discussion for
uniformity.
another day. I have to wind up.
Chairman
But
of the
only one thing, ladies and gentlemen, as we wind up. No matter what any organization says for anybody, the word secular was not part
Everybody
of
knows.
the
You ask
original
why not the
constitution
Dalit
of
and
Bharat.
Sangh
It was not something that was endorsed by Baba Sahib Bhimrao Ramji Ambedkar. And that's for sure. There's no doubt about that. Thank you for watching. Brass Tacks follows.
Many Democrats were in fact turning skeptics. They would have perhaps either voted for the grand old party, given the US economy and the rising inflation, the rising cost of living in mind, or they would have perhaps chosen not to vote for either the Democrats or the GOP. But now with Kamala Harris entering this race, you do expect those fence sitters now to have more clarity. Remember, Kamala Harris is known to be somebody who's been a force behind Joe Biden, somebody who was also orchestrating those policies given Joe Biden's health and his age. So Kamala Harris is also viewed as somebody not just who, if voted to power, will become the United States First Lady President or the first President, First Lady President of South Asian descent, but also somebody who is seen as a very bright pick, and that perhaps also justifies why Donald Trump is also feeling threatened, because here's somebody who could be legit competition for the Republican candidate.
Right, Akanksha. I'll request you to stay with us on the broadcast, as clearly Joe Biden dropping out from the US presidential elections has stirred a lot of controversy and is getting a lot of reactions from the ground. But now we're tracking some updates. Again, former US President Barack Obama has now praised Joe Biden for deciding to drop out of this 2024 presidential race, stating that Biden has been one of America's most consequential presidents. He is a patriot of the highest order. These are the latest inputs that we are tracking, and Akanksha continues to stay with us on the broadcast. Akanksha, a word coming in from the former President Barack Obama praising Joe Biden for deciding to drop out of the 2024 presidential race. How are we perceiving this in the larger political arena?
It's a very interesting tweet congratulating Joe Biden, because several analysts and foreign affairs experts have spoken about the rifts between this relationship. Do remember that Joe Biden and Barack Obama have been a very strong partnership when Barack Obama was in power as the president of the United States. And they were known to have, Joe Biden was somebody who was a strong pillar of support. He was, in fact, their own partnership was one that was a force to reckon with. But over the years, we've seen this partnership also break down. So many were in fact talking about how Joe Biden had taken offense to the fact that there was no support coming in from a Barack Obama when Joe Biden did choose to fight the 2024 presidential election. In fact, there are reports indicating that it was back in the year 2016's presidential race that Barack Obama had not adequately encouraged Joe Biden. He had, in fact, he had discouraged Joe Biden to fight the presidential race of 2016, which is one of the reasons that Joe Biden, attributes for him deciding not to run, and which is the reason why he chose to, in fact, run in 2019. But having said that, many were talking about how there were rifts in this relationship, because Barack Obama, when it came to Joe Biden, was not openly seen endorsing his presidential race. But the fact that he's now welcomed Joe Biden's decision to step down, saying that the decision to step down also shows what a sincere patriot Joe Biden is. It speaks volumes for how, in fact, Joe Biden is also being honored for this decision. We've seen the likes of seniors like a Nancy Pelosi, even a Barack Obama talk about it. But perhaps also an indication that the former US president was not really behind Joe Biden's decision to contest this race.
Right, Akanksha. Thank you so much for bringing in all those details. We'll continue to track the story as the day progresses and we get more reactions on this. But this twist in race for White House after Biden steps down is really something to keep an eye on. But CNN News 18's Alistair D'Souza gets us more details on Biden's decision of dropping out and what it means for the Democrats. Let's listen in.
Joe Biden has ended his bid for a second term in the White House. In a statement, he said, "While it has been my intention to seek re-election, I believe it is in the best."
CNN News 18 and Federal Bank Primetime Studio.
Good evening, this is Brass Tacks. We're coming to you live from the CNN News 18 and Federal Bank Primetime Studio. In what is a special broadcast of Brass Tacks, we'll be having a full panel from CII, the Confederation of Indian Industry, on what exactly to look forward to in the union budget for 24-25. As the Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman will rise tomorrow morning at 11 a.m. to present her 7th consecutive budget, which is a record in itself. It is a budget unlike any other because it will be the first budget of the Modi government 3.0 and it will have to reflect the mandate of 2024. Voters have flagged concerns over economic growth, jobs and inflation. Clearly, India has a few good things going for it. It is the fastest growing major economy on the planet. The Economic Survey, which was tabled today in Parliament, has forecast GDP for FY25 at between 6.5% and 7%. Inflation is well within the RBI's upper end of 6%. But the biggest concern is the lack of jobs, and also more importantly, the lack of employable youth for those jobs. The survey says India has to create at least 78 lakh jobs every single year. We are far from it. What can the Finance Minister do to alleviate that concern? We'll be joined by a special CII panel. But first, what is this economic tightrope walk that Nirmala Sitharaman, the Finance Minister, will have to walk when she presents the Union Budget 24-25?
ये बजट